spotlight view on me, or how does it work?
Yeah, I can do that.
Just checking.
Boom.
Boom.
Good evening, Adrian.
Good evening. Who's that?
Hi, Adrienne.
Sandy. Hey, Sandy, see? Still with those blue shades, huh?
Yeah. Evening.
Good evening.
Hey, Patsy and Sandy.
This feels like another convention. Here we go. Good evening. Okay, how do we have? We're expecting 115 people.
That's great.
And we have our president designate on the line, Mark, and we have our past president and chair of the board, Becky, as well. And we have, I think, Patsy, our president-elect there. So we have the senior leadership, and we have all the directors should be joining us. Rod McKendrick from the CCOF. Rod, I'm just going to warn you that I think I'm under the gun here as it relates to the status of the CCOF, so please have my back. And then, I see one of my VPs, Russ Thomas there. Always there.
Yeah, I don't feel worthy to be on this call, all this high-powered people on there.
Right.
Good evening. You almost belong. Okay, and as we just give a few minutes, I just want to let everyone know, so in case you want to run and do your makeup like I just did, that we're also going to be on YouTube and Facebook Live. So we are carrying this technology to the full limits as we test out the robustness of the platforms as we get ready for Oratorical in a few weeks, July 16th and 17th, or World Oratorical. So we are filling up nicely. Yeah, I see some people here. Steve Inglis, I recognize there. My friend Bob McFadden is there. Bob, we gotta keep the finances right. Let's see. Dwight Phillips there lounging on his sofa.
Yep. And Marlene's listening in the background.
Okay, is she cooking you dinner? You know, those days are
dinner's over.
Oh, okay. You know, those days are over. Okay, we have a past president, Mike Listenberger, joining the room. All right. So Jennifer, you can tell me if I'm good. Okay, so we're all set, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this town hall meeting to discuss the Board of Directors pilot program for Federation of the St. Lawrence region. I want to welcome everyone here to this town hall and thank you for accepting the invitation that we extended as a board to yourselves. And I would like to just make some quick introductions of our senior leadership in terms of the presidents. I won't do the whole board in the interest of time. This is about you sharing with us. But just so you know the level of seriousness that we take for this, I'd like to introduce you to our chairman of our board of directors and immediate past president, Rebecca Butler-Mona, who is there. She just waved. And we have our president designate, Mark Weinsoff. He's standing there. We're actually in the same room. If you look at the logo and the backdrop, we're actually side by side. And okay, I'm back on? Okay, right. And then we have our president-elect, Patsy Garner, in the middle of my screen. I'm not sure where she is on your screen. So she's waving there to you. I saw also we have our executive director, Benny Ellaby. He's next to Mark on my screen and waving there. I'm not sure which other directors are present, but I know Sandy Cyphers is there. I saw Sandy. I expect Sandy Larby to join us as well. I see her.
I'm here.
Those are in the bottom there. And we also have our CCOF president, Rod McKendrick, he is there. Just scanning the room quickly, so please forgive me, directors, if I miss anyone. But in the interest of time, all other directors, I'm assuming Jacques Pallon may be somewhere in the call as well, who's our senior director in Canada of the Canadian Service Center. Staff and senior leaders of the organization, members, everyone, good evening, and thank you for joining this Optimist International Town Hall meeting. We're finding this a useful forum to keep the communication lines open and to be transparent in all that we do as an organization. We believe that our efforts are not only the efforts of the board, but the board is representative of all the members. So yes, there are some things that we're not able to put in the public domain due to legalities, etc. But generally, we pride ourselves on being an organization that is very transparent with our membership. Now, some of you may not agree with that, and I understand that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is not so. It just may mean that the forums that you attend or the forums that you visit, we may not have communicated in all of those fora. So what we may have to do is to find a better way of making sure we target all of our membership in the different communication mediums, but it does not mean that we have not said it publicly. So I just wanted to say it in that way to let you be aware that we as a board take communication seriously, and we're committed to sharing with you what we know and how decisions have been made. Now, I have asked our past president, J.C. Solange, as well as our past board of director, Claire Lebreche, to this meeting as well, and I'll tell you why shortly. In our convention, as mandated by one of our board motions, we were required to provide an update to members on the status of the Federation. And that was done, and that created a firestorm of questions and a firestorm of uncertainty as it relates to exactly what is going on as it relates to this federation, what is going on as it relates to the impact on what we will call, for the purpose of this meeting, and I no means mean to be disrespectful by any choice of word, but the rest of Canada outside of the St. Lawrence region. So just for ease of phrasing. And it prompted me to respond and say, I will speak to everyone who would like to listen. And in terms of our housekeeping rules, I'm going to respectfully ask that you listen to me for probably about 20, 25 minutes as I give you a historical overview and bring you to current. And then I have gotten some questions already in advance from persons who registered. They were very kind to email me certain questions, etc. And what I will do is try to answer those questions in my narrative in the 20 minutes. And if I do not get through all of those, what I will do is ask you to issue any of your questions either live or via the chat function below. So in Ottawa, by way of historical perspective, in Ottawa of 2018, a resolution was brought to the floor of the convention by 54 clubs representing 8 districts in Canada, the entire of Canada. Of those clubs and those districts, it was requested that a federation concept be considered by the board of directors for Canada to primarily allow us to reach a point of growth. I'm going to quickly put it up on the screen for those people who did not attend the convention so that you can see what I'm speaking about if I can figure out how to share my screen. Let's get there quickly. Please forgive me quickly here. I had it figured out before the meeting, but now Murphy's Law says that that doesn't happen. Okay, I'll have to get back. But the resolution as it speaks to, I will share with you very quickly. I'll just read it very quickly for you. It said in part, whereas in recent years, the growth and stability of Optimists International has been a topic of discussion, and whereas the children of tomorrow deserve the benefits that our organization can offer them, and whereas a different structure and organization might be called a federation, and whereas a federation might provide more stability, and whereas the Federation might lower costs for clubs, and whereas the Federation support the delivery of distinctive programs across the country, and whereas the Federation might be more closely aligned with the governmental structures of a country, and whereas the Federation might be more closely aligned with the educational structures of a country, and whereas the Federation might prioritize programs to more closely match the needs of a country, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of Optimists International is asked to consider a resolution for the formation of an ad hoc committee composed of optimistic Canadian members, whose role will be to make a detailed proposal and a plan for a new Optimist Federation structure. This proposal will address organizational structure, management structure, financial structure, leadership development plan, model of collaboration between federation, clubs, and external stakeholders. This committee will present its recommendation to the Board of Directors, which will then be voted on by delegates at the 2019 Optimists International Convention. This committee will not have any financial impact. Okay, someone very graciously shared it, I see here. So what we have in that proposal was a request by 54 clubs from 8 different districts across Canada. And you would have heard what I shared. What many of you who may not have been at the convention would not have heard was that there was a robust debate. And in the debate, the general tone and theme of the debate was that this was something worth considering, but it should be considered for the entire organization. How could a federation structure benefit Optimists International? That was the tone of the discussion. For those of you who may not be aware of how Robert's Rules of Order works, a resolution allows or asks the board to consider a matter. But the board can take an action outside of the resolution as it deems fit or necessary to address the matter of the question being asked in the floor. President Rebecca Butler-Mona, who was the president designate at that convention, as one of her first actions, convened a meeting with myself and President Nick Prillerman, and we discussed how this could be approached. And it was decided that we should form a committee, and that committee will be charged with responding to the idea of a federation for Optimists International, not just for Canada. That committee was formed and it was called RUSA. And you would have heard this acronym being spoken about. And in November of 2018, at the beginning of President Rebecca's year, she got the Board of Directors to approve this committee. So let's talk a little bit about RUSA. RUSA is a committee that was formed, as I indicated, to address this matter, but the charge went larger. The charge was to consider almost like a visioning process for our organization. How could we see ourselves in the future? What were the areas that were going wrong? And what were the things we need to consider to do over the next 3 to 5 years? And RUSA meant the review of the Optimist International organizational structure and administration. So it was a mandate that was given by the Board of Directors. And that committee reported back to the board by March of 2019. Now, I'd like to share with you the members of that committee. The members of that committee was chaired by past international president, Bob Garner. It included representatives from all the major territories of Optimists International. So it included Dr. Carol Jacobs, Carol Haynes, as some of you may be familiar with her. She is from the Caribbean District. It included Mr. Bob McFadden. It included Mr. Tom Lloyd, Mr. Robert Doyle, and I think I'm missing one. But we put a committee that explored or looked at how we could take into account all the cultural and the specific nuances of the organization. So to repeat the committee names, I will give you those names very quickly. Mr. Bob Garner from the USA was chair. Mr. Robert McFadden from Canada. Claire Labreche, I'm sorry, Claire, from Canada. Carol Haynes from the Caribbean. Robert Doyle from Canada, and Tom Lloyd from the USA, serving in the committee in the capacity of chair of the Audit and Finance. So what you saw there was a committee that had a high propensity or skewed with Canadian members because it started in Canada. And we felt that the genesis needed to be considered in that way, but also take into context everyone else. That committee met and spent numerous hours in a very short timeline between November and March when they reported back to the board. And they interviewed every major service organization in the world that is similar to Optimists International, the Lions, the Kiwanis, the Rotarians, the Civitans, the Elks, the JCs, Junior Chambers. And part of their investigation was what worked for them, what models worked, etc., and bringing back feedback to us. And they looked at the different financial models and structures. It came back to the board, and it was felt that a lot more work had to be done. And we continue to empower this committee to continue to search for a way forward. And part of that solution that they came forward was something what we call a strategic operating unit. And in summary, what that meant is how can we empower different groups within our organization to have autonomy, power over their own decision making, and funneling back up to Optimists International. And that was the essence of what an SOU would be if it were to come into being. So in Canada, you can have an SOU either at a regional or a district level. You can have an SOU at a country level, etc. Let's fast forward a little bit now to bring you forward to where we got to in this point. Back in 2019, 2020, when I became the president, and we had now a full RUSA report coming out of our convention in Louisville, we needed to take some additional steps. But before we got there, one of the mandates was to report back to the membership on the Louisville Convention floor. This was done in a town hall meeting. Quite candidly, that did not go down very well. It was not as well received by the delegates because they did not feel that it went far enough or it told them anything. But in addition to that, we also had President Rebecca on her report to the membership of her stewardship, gave a detailed report as to all the steps that have been taken, some of which I just summarized. So we did report back to Louisville in answer to one of the questions in the town hall that has been sent in advance. It just was not received as well as some people would like, but it was reported. So we fast forward to 2019, 2020, and this matter is still over our heads. There was some disgruntlement by some of the members and clubs that presented the motion that we were not moving fast enough. And we asked RUSA to continue to work, but I also decided that I would engage with the membership directly who were championing this initiative. And I tried to understand some of the issues, and I got a good sense of what the issues were. When we did a full drill down of the process, quite bluntly, the organization could not afford to have the entire country of Canada within a federation structure, from a financial perspective. The Canadian clubs represent $820,000 odd of our total dues and revenues of the organization. We run the organization on about $4.2 million in revenue, and the Canadian clubs contribute about $800,000 of that, roughly 20% of the revenues. When you look at that 800,000, it's split almost half-half between the French-speaking clubs and the English-speaking clubs. If we were to go a federation model, one of the essential models or financial architecture of a federation would be to move towards an affiliation or licensing fee. So basically, the federation will pay for the rights to use the name Optimist International, to have access to programming, etc. When we did the numbers, we couldn't make the numbers work, to be quite candid. And as a board of directors, our responsibility as a board is to make sure that we have the financial oversight of the organization, the best interest of the financial health of the organization, but also that we look beyond the finances at the practicality and the pragmatism of any decision that we make. So we have a fiduciary responsibility and a financial responsibility to our membership. If we had gone ahead with the resolution as drafted, it would have destroyed the organization in short order. And the basic reason for that is that we could not charge $800,000, obviously, for a licensing fee. That would not be practical. It would cost more to the members. And we have already heard the call and cry of our members that any decision that we take must look at how we can improve the financial circumstance of our members. We cannot take decisions that will increase the burden on our members, especially at a time when things are challenging. So that wouldn't have flown. And we decided that we were going to look at a different option because we do believe that a federation structure makes sense. What is a federation structure? A federation structure will be a collective of, in our operation, a collective of clubs grouped together who will have direct autonomy over their specific area, full control over that, with central authority coming back to Optimist International. So it gives decision-making, leadership, execution of plans, programs, projects. It would devolve all of that down into the federated structure. You would manage your own finances. You would be able to determine what were the dues that would be paid by members. Would you do a club affiliation model versus a member affiliation model, et cetera, et cetera. That's what a federation was. We are intrigued as a board by a federation model. There are numerous advantages to a federation model that we believe could allow us to grow this organization, but also allow greater leadership opportunities to emerge. And we strongly believe that it's a great advantage. After speaking to our colleagues at all the other service organizations, we believe it could be the catalyst for international expansion, especially into Europe. We could not go into Europe with the same model we have here. It just would fail miserably. And it would cost us a lot to get to that point of failure. A federation model would work because it's sensitive to the culture. It will be practical as it relates to the leadership and the autonomy that would be culturally specific. And it will be financially structured around the realities of the particular area that they're being served. It could be an answer to some of the problems we've been facing. But when you're transitioning from a member-based format to an affiliation fee format, there is going to be a point of loss in transition, financial loss. So if we are going to move this year into a federation structure, we, as an overall organization, we as a board would have to be able to bear the loss that would happen in year one until we can settle down the new structures and get our expenses aligned in place with the new realities. So it wasn't going to work just like that, but we are intrigued by it. So what we came up with was, why not try a pilot? And why a pilot program? The board of directors has full authority to implement pilot programs as it sees fit, to test different concepts, explore different initiatives, and see how it could benefit us. A pilot program was approved by the board at March 4th of 2020. And that pilot program was designed around a federation structure for the St. Lawrence region. Why the St. Lawrence region only? When we looked at our entire organization, the Caribbean, Canada, the USA, we can even go to Asia and Africa, we recognize that the only area that can give us the most efficient test of this federation structure was the St. Lawrence region. And why is that? There's commonality in language, there's commonality in culture, there is a general contiguity as it relates to geography, and it was a region that encompassed all of those factors that I just listed. The uniqueness of a region, it allowed us as a board, therefore, to test the model without us without us going against our bylaws. I can't remember the right word, but but basically, we don't want to go against the rules that we have for ourselves. So within a regional structure, we can test this federation model. And the basic structure of this federation that we're proposing for the French-speaking Canadian area would be that the St. Lawrence region, over a period of 3 years, would execute and operate as a full federation. They would have full autonomy for their region or the area that the federation will operate within. It will have full autonomy over their finances and the programs that they design. Let me say very clearly, the Canadian Children Optimist Foundation is a legally registered entity of Canada. Optimist International, the Optimist International Foundation, has no control, influence, or direction over the CCOF, as it is called. It is a legal entity. It is structured to benefit all clubs in Canada, and the monies that are raised in Canada must be spent in Canada. That's my understanding of the laws of charity as it relates to CCOF. Whether we have a federation or we do not have a federation, the CCOF can still function to benefit all members and clubs or federations or regions or districts or whatever entity comes up. The CCOF can cater to that as long as it is domiciled in Canada. So straight off the bat, the CCOF will not be affected in any way. The board of directors is elected by the membership of Canada, and it will continue to be done so. The CCOF could be domiciled anywhere in Canada. It does not have to be domiciled in the headquarters of this Canadian Service Center in Montreal. It could be anywhere. It could be in Ontario, it could be in Toronto, wherever it chooses to be. That is a decision of the board of directors of the Canadian Children's Optimist Foundation. So any decision of the Federation will not impact the monies that you have invested with the CCOF, and it will not impact the ability of the CCOF to finance and fund the programs of the clubs in Canada, whether they're in a federated structure or not. So I want to be very clear on that. That is something that's going to be happening. That has been a source of concern. The other issue of the Federation is the Canadian Service Center. Now, let's go back to the issue of finances. I mentioned earlier that the Canadian clubs represent $800,000 of revenue to the organization. I want to share a bit more information with you because I don't believe that all the information is known as it relates to finances relating to Canada, and I don't believe that it's understood generally sacrifices that are made by many to make sure that our Canadian brethren and sistren are kept happy. We raised $800,000 in revenues from the Canadian clubs. A large part of our finances as Optimists International, 20%, as I mentioned earlier. 20% membership, 800,000 out of $4 million of revenue. So 20% revenue and 20% membership. The board of directors have a policy, and I believe it was mandated in our bylaws, that the exchange rate is fixed for Canadian members. So I believe it is at $1.27. We do have the ability every 5 years to revisit that, or 3 years to revisit that exchange rate to see how it flows. But by fixing that exchange rate at $1.27, every year the organization takes a hit on revenues of almost $200,000 because of exchange rate losses. Who funds that deficit? All of the members of this organization, not just Canada. And that point needs to be made. And I'm speaking as someone who comes from Barbados, whose exchange rate is $2 to $1. I'm coming from someone who is a member of a club in Jamaica, whose exchange rate is $130 Jamaican to $1. So I understand exchange rates. Canada is the only country that we have a preferential exchange rate fix within our bylaws. $1.27. There is a proposal this year that the exchange rate be increased, that fixed ratio, to $1.33. And the reason that is that we have been seeing an exchange rate of about $1.40 over the last few periods in Canada. And we need to adjust that exchange rate as the bylaws allow us to do. But what we are also looking at the board, and we have approved at our last meeting, is that our bylaws allow us to do a cost of living adjustment. I think this year it was proposed to be some 2% or something like that. The board made a decision that we were not going to enforce the cost of living adjustment for 2020 to 21 Jews because it would have been burdensome on our members. So when we get accused as a board of not listening to our members and the financial challenges, I want to challenge that proposition. One, we fix the exchange rates. Two, we judiciously look at COLA, the cost of living adjustment, and we make decisions as to whether it's practical or impractical, and we find other ways to meet our budget. So the Canadian Service Centre, from a budgetary perspective, accounts for about $450,000 of our expenses. When we net out the dues and what have you, the net loss, including the exchange rate of operating the Canadian Service Centre, is roughly about $100,000, give or take. So that subsidy, once again, is funded within our operational structure and our budgeting. But the Canadian Service Centre is $400,000 and something. So let's look at the arithmetic. If we look at the $800,000 we have in Canada, and I mentioned earlier that the Jews are roughly half-half between the clubs in the St. Lawrence region, and the rest of Canada is the remaining half, you would see that the $400,000 it takes us to run the Canadian Service Centre can be married or matched to the $400,000 that we get from French-speaking Canadian members. So when we made the decision of the pilot program, the only way it could make sense is if we decided that we were going to move the operations of the Canadian Service Center with the Federation. Let's reverse. The Federation will be in charge of its own financial management, its own autonomy. So the Canadian Service Center will be run by the Federation. It'll be staffed by the Federation, and the decisions will be determined by a board of directors that will be elected for the Federation. How does this impact you as primarily English-speaking members of Canada? Optimists International, in its St. Louis headquarters, can meet all of the services that the non-French-speaking members of our organization need. Yes, I have heard complaints that there are issues of service that you do not like, or some of you may not like, that the service delivery level is inconsistent, blah, blah, blah. Let me make the point that that's a management issue. If it is not being run properly, or if the services that you're supposed to get from the Optimists International are subpar or below standard, I, as the president, Mark as the next president, Patsy as the next president thereafter, will have to deal with the executive director and tell him to put metrics in place to measure the service. So service is a management function, so we can improve the service if it is less than ideal. But what is the primary reason of the Canadian Service Center in Montreal that cannot be done, that is not done from St. Louis? It's centered around language. $400,000 centered around language. So when you ask me why I can't lower your dues, that is a part of the answer. I have to serve the needs of all of my members. And the most efficient way of serving our French-speaking members was to have an office located or domiciled in the region that is primarily French-speaking. If we create a federation, the Canadian Service Center will move there. The services that are all otherwise done in English will be done in St. Louis, and it will serve all members in the Caribbean, all English-speaking members in Canada, all English-speaking members in the USA, all English-speaking members in Nepal, in Ghana, Uganda, and all of the other areas that we serve. The Canadian Service Center that will now become the Federation Service Center will service all of the French-speaking needs of that area, or expanded areas, as I will discuss shortly. Jacques Palan, the Senior Director of the Canadian Service Center, retires September 30th. So to dispel another rumor, Jacques has volunteered to retire. He has chosen to retire. It is not a decision of this board. It's not a decision of the executive director. It is a decision of Mr. Palan. Jacques has served this organization wonderfully. He's a personal friend of mine, and I have been blessed to have worked with him on a number of occasions directly. I've traveled with him, and I've gotten to know the man. He is someone that is an asset to the organization, and I say it publicly. But Jacques has chosen that he needs to spend some time to consider other aspects of his life, and he's entitled to do so. Optimist International Board of Directors, at its July meeting, has on its agenda to consider the management function for the Canadian Service Center. We may not replace Jacques with someone at the same senior level as Jacques, but there may be other options that we have to consider. But that's a business decision that we will do, and that decision will stay in place until the transition to a federation happens. So I've tried to answer the Canadian Service Center, the Canadian Children's Optimist Foundation, and the rationale and the history of how we got to a federation. How will this federation function in the French-speaking territories? And the main reason for it. The idea is that there's significant opportunities for growth in the Maritimes, Northern Manitoba, Northern Ontario, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. There's a significant potential for growth within French-speaking regions of Canada. From what I understand, and I may be mistaken, many people in regions such as the Maritimes will have no interest in joining a US-centric organization. So this is why it is more appealing if there's an organization that has a cultural relevance within a particular area of Canada that suits them. This is not a Quebec federation. This is not a federation that is based on the concept of separation that has been a robust debate in Canada for decades. This is a business decision and a strategic decision as to how we can look at implementing a federation structure in our organization that is culturally relevant, financially sensible, and will allow us to grow this organization in a manner that we don't seem to be able to grow in a region that is ripe for growth. So that's the why. Does that mean that in years to come, once we understand how it works, that the rest of Canada could be, if I want to use for lack of better word phrasing, an English-speaking federation? It is entirely possible. And this is where we're going, because one thing we do understand, and some of you will not want to hear this, our district structure is failing us. It has failed us. Our district structure is not working. It is causing a financial burden on our membership. And unless we tackle the issue of failing districts, and I'm pleased to say that our board of directors over the last 2 years have worked extremely hard to find new creative ways to deal with that. And if you listen to my colleague Mark's speech, you would see he touched on that. Our district structure needs to be re-examined. Most of our clubs do not believe that they get the value from our districts that they deserve for the money that they're spending. So any new federation structure will be based on an affiliation license fee to Optimists International for use of the Optimists International Name 1, for use of specific programs like the Junior Golf Program, the World Oratorical Program, the Childhood Health and Wellness Program, and other initiatives that may be negotiated between the Federation leadership and our leadership. In the Board of Directors meeting in March, we appointed Claire Lebreche and JC Sonange as co-directors to form an exploratory committee for this federation. The intended start date of the federation was determined to be October 1, 2021. The initiation date for action to start putting things in place is October 1, 2020. If we have October 1, 2020 to October 1, 2021, we needed to put a steering committee in place to look at all the factors to go into place. The board of directors decided that we would choose an experienced former director, Claire Lebreche, and an experienced past president, JC Sonange, who are from the region. They have put together a wide-ranging committee of people that are looking at things such as governance, marketing, financial structure, programs, activities. They have looked at it in a very comprehensive way. They've tried to get as wide-ranging representation on the committees as they can get. We had also made a decision that we should not consider putting governors and governors-elect in place for 2021 to 2022 until we have the structure that's presented from the steering committee as to how they will function. And why is that important? The Federation Committee, as I will call it for ease of a better phrase, may decide that they're not going to have a district structure within that particular federated region. They may decide that they will have regional leaders or sub-regional leaders. They will have a board of directors. As part of the working outline, I will share with you that the intended outline of that board of directors is that the president of that federated region will have a seat on the board of directors of Optimists International to ensure congeniality and us to have that symbiotic relationship together. We've agreed in our general discussions, so I don't expect it to change, that we will have one international convention that will see all of the federated regions, wherever they may come from in the world, come together. And I say that in the world because we're also looking at something currently that has been brought to me by our growth team for Italy. We have an exciting opportunity in Italy, and that's something that we may decide to put into this particular structure once the board considers the proposal. Whatever it may be, that organization will be joined with Optimists International altogether. And that's something that is important for you to know. So that leadership will be done by elections in Canada, in the region, the St. Lawrence region. The committee is going to dictate how those committees will be shaped and how the elections will be run, and the avenue for people to be elected. So I do not want you to leave here believing that this process has not been transparent. It has not been communicated well, and for that, I apologize to all of you. The resolution came from 54 clubs in 8 different districts of Canada. When we made the decision to go with the pilot program in the St. Lawrence region, I should have come back to you and said this was the decision. And I erred and I made a mistake there. And I apologize to you for that. As leaders, we have to own up to our mistakes and we have to right the wrongs. And today's town hall is an opportunity for us to share the information. We have 106 members on the call, and I have asked that the recording be made available to all of you to share with your membership at the club level or at the district's level so that you can hear firsthand everything we have to say. Before I close, I just want to say one more thing as it relates to our financial structure and share with you some information that you may not be aware of. Our organization in Canada has had particular challenges. And I'm going to share with you a graph. The graph right represents the loss of membership in Canada from 2015 to July 8th, 2020. I know it looks like a ski slope, and it's concerning to us. When you look at that rate of loss, and if you come across to the numbers on the left-hand side of the screen, the top half represents the St. Lawrence region. From 2015, which is the base year I've been using for my analyses on the President Kangana. From 2015 to 2016, we had a loss of 6% membership. It reached a high of 9% from 2018 to 2019, and to date, is trending at 4% in the St. Lawrence region. Conversely, in the rest of Canada, we've gone from a high of 6% to a growth position to now averaging about 4% now. I share this information so that you understand that unless we make decisions that will correct this curve and make it less difficult to ski on, we're going to disappear. If this federation structure will allow us the opportunity to explore a potential growth opportunity, but still a financially sensible opportunity, this is something that I think we should explore. I want to stress again, this is not a Quebec initiative. It's a French-Canadian Federation or French-speaking Canadian Federation. It is not a Quebec initiative. Wherever there are opportunities for growth within French-speaking territories in Canada, it will fall within this federated structure. If the opportunity presents itself in 3 years, that we can roll this out into other areas, like the English-speaking Canadian region, or we can look at the Caribbean, or we can look wherever, we will do so. We have worked on a focus this year of retention of members. And I'm pleased to report to you that we're averaging 90% retention, up from 84% so far. Once we get our foundation right and strengthened, we looked at our programs, we look at our methods of marketing, and I think we're going in the right direction. I believe by the time we get to President Patsy's year, we would have stopped most of the hemorrhaging and we would be going in the right direction. I sincerely believe that. I think this board has worked extremely hard to look at our governance models. We've looked at our financial models. And I think you, as members, will have every right to come to your board members and say, I want a reduction of my dues. Because we would have tightened up the financial ship. We would have been able to protect the organization financially, and we will be able to give those returns back to our members. If I am losing $105,000 as the president of this organization, using the word I loosely, please forgive me. But if I'm losing $105,000 as the president of this organization, I have a responsibility to find ways to reduce that loss. And if this decision can help us to manage the loss, we will look at it. Because there's no other reason to maintain a service center in Canada except to service our Canadian members who speak French. And whether we want to accept that or not, that is it. There's no other reason why we have to have that cost. So if we can lower the money, or if we can get accrue savings, we should give those savings back to the members at some point. Insurance, that was one other question. Insurance will continue to be in Canada. It will continue to be held by a carrier in Canada. The Canadian insurance companies cover the entire country, and we will probably, at a board, have to look at decisions as it relates to brokers in Canada who can get the best deal for the type of coverage that we have. So insurance will not be impacted by this decision. The Federation could make a decision as to if they want to get a different insurance model consistent with their financial structure that they're debating. But as it relates to all of you in the non-French speaking territories, you will be fully covered by our insurance. And it will be a Canadian company, as it is much cheaper to have a French carrier than to have a US insurance carrier covering Canada. So I think I've ticked all of the questions that I have gotten, and I will make myself available for questions, but I will share with you some of the questions that we have gotten over the period of time that I've been looking at. So I had a question from Gil Dawson in Norwich Optimist Club. How we chose this particular region of Canada? Well, I gave an answer. I gave that answer already. We looked at how we can find a region that is has the cultural characteristics, the ability for growth, particular nuances of geographical structure, and we decided that the St. Lawrence region was the easiest and the most logical solution for a pilot there. So Gail, I hope I answered your question. Michelle Stokes from the Optimist Club of Lancaster, she asked the exact purpose and how does this differ from OI? It's still going to be part of OI. Everyone will still be called an optimist and is trying to achieve or accomplish a more efficient model of membership that will still allow us to carry out the needs for our children in the communities in which they live, but in a more effective manner while giving more authority and control to people in those particular regions. She asks why a separate committee established to look at the Francophone community with most of the committee members living outside of Canada. That's not true. The majority of the committee members in RUSA were from Canada, and they were French-speaking and English-speaking. I outlined that earlier. The Canadian Children's Optimist Foundation will continue to be a separate legal entity, and it will be administered by Canadians elected by Canadian members. The insurance will be continued, and it will continue to be different from the US model of insurance and be held by insurance companies in Canada. The Federation will consider its own insurance or join with us to save costs. The Canadian Service Centre will go with the Federation, and all clubs in Canada that are not within the French-speaking areas of Canada will be serviced out of St. Louis, Missouri, our current headquarters. What is the cost to run the Canadian Service Centre? Just under $500,000. It's a total cost, but I want to caution you that that is netted against the revenue. And when we look at the exchange, the loss of exchange on currency exchange, it's roughly a loss to the overall organization of about $110,000. So if we look at what we want to call the cost to Optimist International is that loss of about $100,000+. Why were the Canadian English-speaking clubs not informed of this action regarding the French Federation? Everyone was informed of the Federation concept at the Ottawa Convention. It was reported again at the Louisville Convention, and I dropped the ball this year when we made the final decision in March. I went to the regional meeting in Trois-Rivières in March. Then COVID came about, and I did not speak to the rest of Canada. So I apologize, and I speak to you now. Please forgive me. The Federation currently appears to be highly organized, has a website and a logo, so they're well beyond the pilot stage. No, this is all the planning stage, Michelle. And we have to plan, and we have to make sure it's right. And they can get to a point where we, as a board, will make the decision that it is not feasible based on the plan that's presented to us. And that's the reality. And the committee is fully aware of that. We're working hand in hand. We're committing financial resources to ensure that it can be successful. But the reality is, once we get the final plan and it will be a negotiation with parties, I will admit that, we will have to make a final decision as a board. But right now, based on the trajectory, it looks like it's well on track for an October 1, 2021 start date. Once the end of the 3 years, Michelle, one of the last things I will say is that we are going to enshrine it within our bylaws once we've proven that we have the data to support the decision. Adrian Mays, forgive me if I don't get the pronunciation right, but my namesake Adrian is from Orangeville, and he asked a number of questions. He wanted to ask about the purpose of the town hall was to hear about this French speaking. Yes, it is. He indicated it's the first time he's heard of this matter, and he's assuming that only the French speaking region, that's true, but it's not a separation. That's also true. He's heard the word federation. I've told him what it meant I've explained what it means within our context, and I've also indicated that it will have no impact on the CCOF. Al Wood sent a number of questions. The CCOF, the Canadian Service Centre, we've spoken about those at length. And what will be the distribution of dues? Will dues from the clubs in the rest of Canada will be distributed either directly or indirectly to the Federation, or will the Federation be financially self-supporting? Great question coming from Alwood. The intention is for the Federation to be fully financially self-supported. Their financial model, and they have a number of strong financial experts looking at different models, will define a structure that takes into account the licensing fee that will be paid to Optimists International, plus what they will ask their members to contribute to the Federation. All dues that are paid at the club levels will remain in the Federation, and the Federation's executive leadership will pay for the right to use the name and the programs, etc. So it's intended to be financially self-supporting. Will it be so from day one? No. So Optimist International will commit bridge financing until that point comes, and we will ensure that budgets and what have you are received by our board and considered by our Audit and Finance Committee to determine that level of financial support. Alex Ansel also wrote that we set up the committee about 3 years ago. It was set up in 2018 November by President Rebecca Butler-Mona, and we did report to the 2019 convention, as I explained in my preamble, and I reported again at the 2020 virtual convention. Why it was a separate committee? That was also answered. Insurance, I've answered that. Who will service Canadian English-speaking clubs? That will be done on St. Louis. Why was it not brought before the 2020 International Convention? It was brought, but a pilot does not require convention delegates to vote on. A pilot can be approved by the board, but a report was given, and we did have a town hall meeting with translation by the leaders of the committee appointed by the board, Claire Lebreche and J.C. Tenorange. So those were the questions that were asked. Are there any other questions that you will have of me? There are probably some in the chat. Tracy or Stephanie, can you just give me the summary of them vocally so I can hear it? I can't read that, Tracy. Can you verbalize?
Yep, I sure can. So the first question from Jennifer Kriesel was, going forward outside of New Brunswick and a small part of Nova Scotia that borders New Brunswick, most of the Atlantic provinces are English speaking and culturally strong with their own ideals and traditions. They will not be interested in a federation model that is primarily French speaking. So there is a lot of potential growth, but an Atlantic federation will need to be established for Newfoundland, Labrador, PEI, and most of Nova Scotia. Please consider this moving forward.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's good information to have, and I'll ask Dana to make a note of that for the board for consideration. I believe what we'll have to do there is to create a target area for our growth team to go into and work. And between myself, Mark, and Patsy, we will try to put some ideas behind how that could function so we could see if that's a potential growth opportunity for us. So thank you so much for that, Jennifer.
Vicky Maines, I believe it is important to keep the word Canada or Canadian in the name. So for example, an Atlantic Canada Federation.
Okay, that's something we have to consider. As I indicated, right now the pilot is for a region that exists in Optimists International. We're still trying to stay within our bylaws, so it's a pilot for the St. Lawrence region. That's how it's been named at the board, and for the pilot to function, it's ideal that we still keep it within our current structure of Optimists International.
Brent Santacona. So how is it going to help English-speaking Canada? Because the Canada to US conversion has been an ongoing issue for several years that has not moved in our favor since we started talking about the issue in 2015, 2016. It is not specifically a French-Canadian issue. It's a Canadian issue.
Okay, I'm not sure if my friend Brett is asking about conversion from an exchange rate, but if you are answering that, the board and or bylaws are committed to maintaining the exchange rate structure. The board does have flexibility every review period, and Benny would have to correct me, but I think it's every 5 years or so, we can look at the exchange rate and we can analyze the trend of the exchange over a period, and it comes down to a number. The current number is $1.27. The current exchange rate in Canada is running about $1.40, and the board is proposing through its Audit and Finance Committee for 2020 to 2021 an exchange rate of $1.33. So if the question is as it relates to exchange rate, Brett, what I will say to you is the delegates many years ago, before you and I were probably born, made a decision that the US dollar was going to be our currency. It is the official currency of Optimist International. It's a currency that has to be paid by Jamaica, by Barbados, by Antigua, Anguilla, Canada, Nepal, Uganda, what have you. Because of the strength of the Canadian lobby, and probably because of where the vote for it happened to be a Canadian convention, it was voted on that an exchange rate be fixed for Canada. When that was done, quite frankly, whether you want to agree with me or you're happy with me for saying it, it was disadvantageous to many other people outside of the USA. And that's a reality. How can you look at Jamaica paying $130 $1 and they can get a fixed exchange rate, but then argue that $1.27 or $1.33 is unfair? When membership signed up for Optimists International, it was a US organization. That's the reality. And whether we like it or not, we could have lobbied to move the headquarters and the currency to Canadian dollars. That is something that's within the power of delegates. But it is a US organization. I'm a Barbadian, I'm in the Caribbean. I pay an exchange rate. And this is the reality of what happens when you need one central currency. So, Brent, I'm sorry if I didn't answer what you want to hear, but it's the truth and it's the reality. Tracy.
The next note was from Michael Wood. Not sure we should consider the July membership numbers as relevant during a pandemic. And I didn't copy this other one, but someone else mentioned that the pandemic was causing an influx of loss of members.
And that's a valid point, and I accept that point. What I will say is that surprisingly, our rate of attrition or our rate of loss has been much less than we projected. And I commend all of you leaders on this call for the amount of work that you've been doing to still keep us active. Right now, on a revenue level, outside of some decisions related to golf, we are trended ahead financially. We're down 0.79% on membership dues. That's our deficit. We've made it up on our expenses. So we have a positive surplus on our general operation. We come into a full loss when we look at our Optimist International Youth Programs Foundation, which is the program that manages our junior golf. Because we're not having junior golf this year, we have a full slate of expenses as it relates to staff costs that we have no revenue to match against it. So the losses that we're having as an organization are explained losses. And I'm pleased to report that our revenue is only down on membership dues 0.79% at the end of May. And I think it's trending still well, still in the negative, but less than 2%. So I think that's pretty good for the pandemic that we're facing, that we expect it to be slaughtered. And I commend all of the club leaders on this call for keeping their clubs going.
Vice President Lyle Miriam, what yardsticks are being considered to determine the success of this initiative? How will the pilot be concluded at the end of the trial?
Okay. The end of the pilot period is 3 years from 2021, 2024. And the different measurements would be one, the potential for members to continue to develop in leadership positions, the ability of the federation to be self-sufficient, the federated structure to be self-sufficient, and the impact of our growth and the impact on our members and our community. So there'll be other metrics, but those are the three primary metrics: our leadership opportunities for our membership, or financial stability, and growth. Those will be the three membership criteria. I know my brother Lyle, who's one of my vice presidents, is not asking me to be a pessimist and think that this will fail. We are optimists by membership and by life, and we know this will be a wildly successful program, and it will deliver great dividends to our organization. So I'm fully optimistic of full success. We decided that 1 year was definitely not enough. That 3 years was a better benchmark for us to assess the true strength of the concept and bring it into a profitable model. I'm also well satisfied that the committee and the efforts that have been made by the committee are outstanding. They've worked really hard, and I believe that they can successfully bring us to a successful process.
Governor-elect Marilyn Bushell. So am I to understand that Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC will be safe in their cross-border affiliations?
Can you repeat that question, please, Tracy?
Yes. From Governor-elect Marilyn Bushell. So am I to understand that Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC will be safe in their cross-border affiliations?
I honestly don't have a clue about the geography of Canada, so I don't know where those places are. I can simply say that French-speaking areas that are currently defined within the St. Lawrence region are the only areas that we are considering within the Federation, and then the Federation's scope for growth will be in other French-speaking areas of Canada, and they will fall under that Federation. But the current geography and definition of the St. Lawrence region will obtain. That's what we are working with. Growth out of that will, within French-speaking Canada, will that Federation. So I hope I answered the question. So I will say, let's say, for example, the AMS-NW, where my friend Eric Christian is, there are clubs on both sides of the border. Those clubs will still belong with the AMS-NW, to give you an example.
She's the governor-elect for AMS-NW, so that will be where her concern lies.
Marlon Bushell, can you raise your hand any higher? Well done. Go on.
Governor Mikey Bowles, how does a federation structure allow for growth that the current structure doesn't? I understand clubs aren't feeling they are getting their needs met by a district model, but how does that translate into more members? Are people not joining because of the structure?
Great question, Mikey. Mikey is one of our, I like to call him one of our thought leaders in this organization, a young, dynamic governor from Missouri. Our structure is failing us. Let me be candid. But there's a lot of emotion tied to our structure. And you can't dismantle a structure, one, in our case, without the permission of our delegates, because it's enshrined within our Constitution. And then two, you can't make rash decisions that will affect the entire organization. So any change has to be gradual. The federation model is an interesting model because what it does, it localizes or parochializes decision making and leadership opportunities within a geographical area. And that becomes exciting because we all know that people who know an area, that operate within an area, that live within the area, are best suited to work and lead that particular area. So we believe that's one great opportunity. The other that is potentially exciting is that it will allow us to have a more flexible financial model. Right now, our dues are based on providing certain programs, services. Your club dues include an allotment for districts that range between $10 and $16 US per year. Without a district structure, that will disappear. And the question you should ask yourself, will services be compromised? In some great areas in great districts where things are done well, that's fine. Have some short-term goals. But I believe the decisions that we have been making over the last couple of years, such as investments in technology, investments in training, those things will redound to our benefit for the future of this organization, Mikey. So, for example, our learning management system that we have just rolled out in May, that's revolutionary and it's groundbreaking. It's revolutionary and it's groundbreaking. I'm not sure how much you have been able to investigate it, but the strength and the power in that, regardless of whether we're at 100% or not yet, will allow us to carry training directly to our member. And right now, there's so many filters to get to our member that we are not bringing new leaders up in this organization at the same pace as we did years ago. So leaders are being lost because they're not seen. Unless you get into a district structure, you don't get seen by Optimists International, you don't get seen by the CQ committee, and this impacts our organization in terms of developing leaders. I believe a federation structure will create better opportunities for leadership, it will create better opportunities for financial management, and it will be more affordable for our members in general. So I think when you put those together, plus understanding the geography of the region, wherever you're operating, it can create a better understanding of what's required to grow within that region. So, a business in Barbados a lot easier than I can grow a business in the USA because I know my country, I know my land. So, likewise, Mark can do the same thing in Santa Barbara or in California. We know the region, so you can better expand there. Why don't we do it now? I believe we're doing it, but to some degree, we're not maintaining it as well. So we're growing, but we're losing a lot of these clubs that we've been bringing in have not been built, quite bluntly, in an altruistic manner. Some of them have just been built for what I hate, the awards purpose, and that is wrong. So once we are building from the perspective of sustainability, I think we're going to have a better organization when we have a more flexible model. So yes, Mikey, I do believe it creates greater opportunities than we do have now.
Bill Campbell from the Optimist Club of Calgary. How will the proposed St. Lawrence region support English-speaking members' clubs in the same region? And there's also multiple questions of what is the St. Lawrence region while you cover that one.
The St. Lawrence region is properly defined, and everyone who's in that region knows that they're in that region. There is no solely English-speaking club or district within the St. Lawrence region currently. There are bilingual members and bilingual clubs, if you want to call it that. But to my knowledge, I will stand corrected if I'm wrong, there are no solely English-speaking members in the St. Lawrence region. So they will continue to be serviced as a member of Optimists International through the Federation for those who are currently part of the St. Lawrence region. I do not know in memory who are the names of all the districts in the St. Lawrence region, but Natalie Boulay is my VP, And I do know that Eastern Ontario has a large bilingual community, but I honestly can't tell you the names of the district off the top of my head. But I can assure you that there are no English-speaking only clubs in the St. Lawrence region. So all clubs that are currently in the St. Lawrence region will remain there for the federation purposes.
Michelle and Sandra Stokes. For the most part, I would say that most members, unless active in district, are not aware of what the district does, what its directors and chairs are for, or they may not care. I highly doubt they are not joining due to structure. More so, time, priorities, and a multitude of different service options that may not have an $80 plus annual fee to join. Just my 2 cents.
You know, Michelle, you're a girl after my own heart. We have to be honest to ourselves. Why should somebody pay to volunteer? I mean, it's a very simple question that has to be answered. Why should somebody pay to volunteer? The model of volunteering, or the reason why people joined service clubs in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when most of us joined, it's a lot different to a child today or a young person today joining. We had networking opportunities. There were requirements of employers that you had to belong to a service organization. The needs in the communities were not being met in a way. So we get now, fast forward to the 21st century, we have information on our fingertips. We have volunteerism at an all-time high. So that person needs to ask, why should they join this organization? So let's go back to our virtual convention platform. Last 2 weekends ago, I stressed to our members that we needed to look at our financial model. We need to understand whether we can continue to be an organization that is focused on membership-based dues, or do we need to find a way to transition to alternative revenue sources to benefit our members? And that is something that I strongly believe we have to do. 98% of our current revenues are coming from dues. We need to start shifting that paradigm to reduce the amount of dues. And concurrently, our marketing teams need to espouse the benefits of membership. Now, what could be these benefits of membership that you'll be willing to pay for? I will dare posit that most of those benefits to membership should be anchored around personal development. How do I, as a person, benefit from being a member professionally and personally? Could I develop tools that will allow me to live a more productive life as an employer or employee and as a citizen of the world? And if those tools can be had through our organization, then there should be a value associated for that. But don't tell me that for me to give up my entire Saturday and 4 evenings a week to go and read to children, clean up a play park or what have you, I have to pay Optimists International to do so. That's our number one challenge. But obviously, since 98% of our dues are dependent, our revenues are dependent on dues, we can't make that decision just like that. We need to graduate to that decision. And my hope is that I can see within maybe 3 to 5 years an organization that's willing to take a chance to move towards an affiliation model, which will be what I call like a licensing model. So if we can design an organization that every club will pay $1,000 to just use the Optimist name, and that club can write that check for $1,000 based on the support it gets from a corporate sponsor, or they can charge the members in their club $30 to get to that $1,000. I think that's a model we need to work forward towards, and I believe the federation structure will allow us to get there quicker than our current structure will. But we have to prove it, and this is one of the reasons we're going through this exercise. But Michelle, I totally agree with you.
From Garth Chattison, is the Federation required to keep all the documentation, etc., in both English and French, as Canada is bilingual, not just French? The problems with transferring the rest of Canadians who speak English to the USA is going to carry with it many problems because of the ethnic and geographical differences of Canadians. There was a reason to create the Canadian Centre in the first place. Now that will only be available to the French.
I'm trying to think carefully how to answer that. One, I don't agree with you. I believe that the US Service Center is more than adequately able to service all of our English speaking clubs wherever they are in the world. Are there some quality issues we need to improve? Yes, I will accept that. But I do not accept that our organization cannot adapt to the different ethnic and cultural nuances required to service sensitively and sensibly all English speaking members wherever they are in the world. So from that perspective, I disagree with you. If we get to a federation model in the rest of Canada, then the similar would obtain. That federation can decide to build out an administrative hub within that particular area to service it within the cultural nuance that you have. Now, I noticed that someone put in the chat that part of their dues goes towards the Canadian Service Center. That's not necessarily accurate either. Your dues go towards Optimists International, the administration, the structure, staffing, programs, activities, insurance, and part of the administration will be the same Canadian Service Center and the US Service Center, US headquarters. So you as a Canadian member are not paying specific dues for a Canadian Service Center. All of us, I am Barbados, I'm paying dues for a Canadian Service Center.
From Russell Thomas, Vice President. How do we know the pilot is successful? Is the metric only growth in membership?
I think I answered that with Lyle. So Russ, with your permission, we'll just accept the answer I gave to Lyle earlier. Growth, financial membership are yes, two different areas, but we also believe that leadership development is an important anchor as well.
The next two questions, one from Paul Gross and one from Governor-elect Robert Jackson, kind of duplicate each other. Paul Gross, hi, did I hear the Federation pilot may be expanded to include other French-speaking clubs around the world? If this is true, have we not created what we have now with a centrally located OI in America, just a French-speaking one? And then Robert Jackson asks, there are pockets of French-speaking Canadians all over Canada. What happens if these pockets decide to join the St. Lawrence Federation?
First thing, I did not say that this federation will deal with the world. So I indicated that it will deal with French-speaking areas in Canada. So it was not in the world. What I did say was that opportunities will exist for federation structures to be established across the world, as we may define. And I gave an example how we are exploring an idea in Italy, and that may work better within a federation structure versus our traditional structure. So that's the example. So Paul, I just wanted to make sure I corrected any misunderstanding there. The second part of the question, wherever an Optimist club could be formed, I think we should celebrate. And if that Optimist club is formed in a French-speaking area, wherever they are in Canada, they should be welcomed somewhere within Optimist International. And within what we are proposing, the most logical place for them to be domiciled and welcome will be within the federation structure. It will contribute to the growth narrative. They will be serviced more efficiently and consistently with language and information that is familiar to them. So yes, wherever there's opportunity for growth, the French Federation can expand that their geographical footprint. The board of directors will be fully aware of everything that is happening, so nothing is going to be done outside of the ambit or knowledge of the board. And I also want to indicate that on the board of directors for 2020 to 2021 and beyond, we have Mr. Luc Dubois and we have Mr. Robert Doyle, who are from the St. Lawrence region, but we also have Ms. Sandy Larrabee, who I believe has one more year left on the board, who is from, I think she's from Swan, but let's say she's from outside of the St. Lawrence region. But basically, we have 3 Canadians on the board of directors, and as much as we are supposed to be geographically neutral in our views, human nature takes over and all of us lobby for our particular causes. So I don't believe that the Messrs. Dubois and Doyle will allow the board to do anything that will jeopardize the success of the Federation.
From Vicky Maines, French translation costs I would New Brunswick like Moncton, which is also primarily French.
Right, and that's possibly true. We are currently spending about $55,000 in translation costs alone, and that is a cost that will not have to be borne by Optimists International, and it could therefore create an opportunity for us to better rationalize our cost structures. And when we rationalize our cost structures, I personally believe any rationalization should redound to the benefit of our membership at the dues level. So I think it's going to be very hard for us to sell increased dues if we continue to find creative ways to manage our costs. So yes, Vicky, the transition will be, well, it shouldn't be necessary within a federated structure because everything will be in one language, in summary.
From Denise Nassif, if we are going to be making changes, we need to employ effective change management practices. This allows us to take into consideration the emotional attachment to structures and processes that are no longer allowing the organization to grow and be effective. We should be looking at the ADKAR model while we are making changes.
I am totally going to volunteer Denise Nassef to sit with me and explain to me those models, and maybe to volunteer to the organization the skills that she may have to help us through these processes. Because I totally agree with her. Change management is an important tool. We've seen it. Many of us have gone through mergers in our employers and what have you, and we've seen the positive and negative impacts of mergers. So I do believe that you're onto something, Denise, and if you have those particular skills, we would welcome your support at the Optimist International to skills to us.
Gary Hill, as a member that has paid dues to have a Canadian service center, I do not understand why we have to go to the USA for services. They simply do not understand the needs of Canadians.
Gary, you currently pay dues as well for the US Service Center. So kind of a double-edged sword. You are paying for the overall administrative structure of the organization. I am not sure specifically what needs Canadians have that other people around the world don't have that can't be serviced. So if you have specific examples that you can shoot me an email, Adrian_Alcock@yahoo.com. I'd be more than willing to see what we need to do to make sure that those needs are met. But off the cuff, I can't think of any need that we cannot meet. We are currently servicing clubs in Uganda, in Ghana, in Nepal, in China, and other countries within Africa. And we're serving 8 clubs in the Caribbean. And we are not having a propensity of disagreement or complaints in the service that is being carried out. So I would welcome any specific examples you may have, and you can send them to me by email. And I promise I'll get back to you.
Edward Murphy, What are other service clubs doing for the Francophone community?
Other service clubs have all of the different, what would you call that? All the different languages represented, more than we do at Optimist International. Optimist International have primarily been Francophone or Anglophone. Rotary Lions, etc. They're very strong in the Spanish-speaking territories as well. And they use a combination of federation structures, and they use a combination of technology to effect translation or communication modalities that will meet communication needs from headquarters to those particular areas. Or organization has been resistant traditionally to the introduction of technological tools. But this year, the pandemic has helped us to overcome a lot of those hurdles. And I'm hoping that we will be able to continue to expand the use of technology to help better manage costs. For example, it costs us $59,000 to ship and to produce magazines to go across to Canada in both languages. And overall, I believe Bob McFadden will have to correct me, but when we made the decision this year to shift 2 of those issues to the digital platform called Issuu, ISSUU, we had a savings of some $60,000 that we were able to balance our budgets with. We have a $4 million operation that we're running. 39% of that goes to administration, salaries, overhead, give or take. The balance goes to programming, insurance, things like that. The more we can get efficiencies, the better we can get that administration number under control, and the better we can improve our delivery of services. Mark has had to make tremendous sacrifices for 2020 to 2021 to ensure that we stay within the parameters of our budget. And I have had to do the same, even with this pandemic. Bob McFadden, Connie Pellock, and Teresa Overgoner, the financial leaders of our organization, we have to speak monthly, and we have to figure out what we're going to cut and where we're going to go. I will tell you that we had in 2006 49 staff in our organization. Now we are at 32 staff. 32 staff members that we've had. 17 members we have not been able to replace, and staff are working hard. We've repurposed staff to do other activities. So I really don't want the message to go out that your board is not trying every possible opportunity to find more efficient ways to manage the finances so we don't have to come back to the members for dues. I mentioned earlier in the virtual convention that this year, through fate, through strategy, through luck, we were able to get almost $1 million in non-dues revenue. When you net it out, it's going to come down to roughly about 600,000 based on what it is. But we need to use that money to figure out new ways to drive new additional revenue that are not dues oriented. And therefore, we can take the pressure off of you, the member. And that's what we have to do, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Vice President Russ Thomas, is there a draft of the Federation leadership structure from club to Federation?
There is a draft of the structure that the Federation model is working on. It will be premature of us to share that widely because they are not yet finished with their model. They're still looking at the modeling and putting a financial costing to the modeling. I have seen it because they have shared it with me from a preliminary perspective. I can say that it will have a board of directors within the Federation structure, and they're looking at sub-regional leaders, etc. But beyond that, when it's available for approval by the board, because the board, right now, I can't help but reiterate, this is in a planning phase. And once the board considers the final report that comes to us, hopefully before the end of this year, with a full budget, we will be able to know whether we can press play. Once we have pressed play, it will be shared widely and openly, and we will get that out to you in the most efficient models possible.
There we go. From Vice President Lyle Merriam, will we get an opportunity to see the structure of the Federation? I tend to be a nuts and bolts guy. I'm curious how it will be implemented. Will Optimists International mandate some programs to the Federation? Who has the final say if the Federation and Optimists International have conflict?
The Board of Directors of Optimists International is the ultimate decision-making body of the organization and will remain so. That's mandated by our Constitution, and that will not change in the near future as I can see. I answered the question of sharing the structure, and you can get your nuts and bolts and screwdrivers and spanners and what have you, and you can go through it, Lal, at that point. But the Board of Directors will be the point of ultimate appeal and decision making of the organization. There was another part of that question. I think I missed Tracy.
There is, and Lyle has a follow-up question too that I might throw to you. So his original question was, will Optimists International mandate some programs to the Federation?
The licensing that we're looking at will include certain programs. It will include the use of the name. From a legal structure, we have recognized that there is power and value in the Optimist International name when they're dealing with corporate supporters, structures, et cetera. It gives them that credibility. We do recognize that there's some programs that we consider international in nature. For example, the junior golf, the world oratorical, et cetera, as I mentioned earlier. Those will be part of whatever affiliation fee, licensing fee, whatever it will be called, federation fee. Those will go as a natural part. But if, for example, the Federation wants to have the St. Lawrence Federation Curling Championships, they're able to form that and fund it however they choose to fund it. If they want to have the downhill skiing competition, that can be done. They will have full autonomy to do whatever programs they do. Now, obviously, in using the Optimist International name, we will come up with a list of things that will be given to the entity to make sure they do not bring our name into disrepute. So some programs that may not fit the ambit of Optimist International may not make the cut because we have to protect our name and our brand. And that's so in any organization. What's the follow-up question?
Comment was made about the head of the Federation having a seat on the Optimist International Board of Directors. While not necessarily comfortable with this decision, is this a non-voting position similar to the Foundation's president's?
I am not sure how we will deal with the voting structure yet, but I think it's important that if we have federations out there that are representing a large group of people, that they should have a seat on the board of directors. I think it's important for us so that we understand what's going on at the federation level, but it's also important for them to maintain the linkage to leadership. So I do believe that as much as you may have some discomfort with that, that is a sensible decision. To your point as to whether it's a non-voting or voting decision, it would be premature of me to answer that question at this point in time.
From Bill Campbell, the Optimist Club of Calgary, if the concern for the St. Lawrence region is primarily language issues, couldn't OI produce all content in French and English?
We currently do. We do provide that content in French and English. There is a significant cost to doing such that is borne by the other 48,000 members of the organization to do that. What we're trying to do is find a more efficient model that could better manage issues of language. And if we were able to move into Latin America, for example, it would make more sense to also look at a federation structure there so that things are culturally and linguistically relevant to the particular region. So that is currently done, and that will continue to be done until the Federation comes into effect. I also want to piggyback on that question. The Canadian Service Center will continue to be run by Optimists International until the Federation comes into effect. So I know there's some people that have expressed concern that the Canadian Service Center is closing on September 30th, 2020, and that's a fallacy. That's not true.
Not seeing any more questions except for one, and hoping that any that I might have skipped was because they were actually answered immediately in the chat. The last question I see is from Denise Nassiv. What about joy?
Right. The Junior Optimist International has not been properly defined within the structure, but it is anticipated that the Joy as a program will move also with the Federation. The Federation will have Joy clubs within their particular area. How the logistics will work out, we have not thought it through. So I'll have to get back to you on that. But the Joy organization itself will be structured in the same way as the junior golf program. It'll be operated in U.S., Caribbean, as well as within the Federation. So that's the intent. It's not the intent to reduce that level of international programming to the area.
We did just get one last question. Governor Mikey Bowles would like to ask, who is President Adrian's favorite Backstreet Boy?
Mikey, I'll have to ask, who are the Backstreet Boys?
Of course, I know who the Backstreet Boys is.
But I can't tell you, Mikey, who my favorite Backstreet Boy is. But I do know Brian Adams is from Canada.
Brian Wallace is asking, please clarify the future for Western Canadian clubs.
Western Canadian clubs are important clubs, as are any other clubs in Canada. I take Western Canada to be, I'll remember that part from geography. But yes, the clubs will still continue to function, carrying out service in the communities and to the children, and supported by Optimists International fully. So Brian, no fear, we got your back. We'll support you as we all do, and you'll get more direct support if possible. If we find good projects and programs, the foundation will continue to service you. So no need to worry. We have about 10 minutes left. I also remind you that we're on YouTube and Facebook as well. So we have a number of people there as well. If anyone has a question, but they don't know how to use the chat function and they want to speak, I don't know if we should take the risk of unmuting everyone and let people raise their hand and just try that. I know it can get confusing, but Stephanie, you want to try that quickly? Unmute everyone. Questions that were not that someone needs to answer because they prefer to speak vocally.
I'll just say good job tonight. I think you answered a lot of questions and you did it with a lot of style and grace. I appreciate having you as my president.
That's very kind of you, Michael. I appreciate that. Jennifer, did we have any questions on the Facebook live feed or the Facebook feed that we didn't cover here?
Just Adrian, just a quick advertisement. Waldorf Oracle is next 16th, 15th, and 16th, next Thursday and Friday. It will be open. It will be Zoomed out. So let's welcome everybody to tune in and watch the kids. 38 kids, 44 kids in total. Some $60,000 in prize money. So welcome everybody to join.
Okay, thank you, Benny, for that. And I will indicate that after strong negotiations and what have you, the Canadian Children's Optimist Foundation is a proud sponsor of the World Oratorical Contest this year, contributing a significant amount of money to support the program. And I'm very, very happy with that. It's something that we feel very strongly about. I want to thank Rob McKendrick and the team, Jack Palan and JC Solange and the team there for supporting us this year.
Anastasia, and she's crying.
All right, so you can mute your phones if you're not speaking, but assuming there's no other remarks, I will ask President Mark if he wants to give a few closing remarks to commit the organization that this is not a one-off initiative. This is the Board of Directors initiative going into 2020 to 2021. I'll put Mark on the spot. Can Stephanie, can you unmute Mark, please?
Thank you. Adrian, I want to say to you, I really appreciate what you've done tonight. It was a marathon session for you talking, and I think you very clearly answered the questions that were being raised, and I appreciate what you've done tonight. I want to tell everyone that I walk in solidarity with Adrian, and we will, and the committee that's working on the pilot project, and that we will carry forward next year as you know, as we approach the launch of that program. So I don't have anything else to say other than we think optimism is important during these times, and that will continue to be the case in Canada, the United States, and all around the world.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. I commit to you, all the members of the organization, that this board, successive boards, will continue to be as open and transparent. I think it's fortuitous that in a good way out of this pandemic, we have more people understanding these platforms that allow us to have these type of sessions that we may not have been able to have in the past. On July 22nd, I'm hosting another meeting of what we have labeled the President to President Forum, and all of the presidents on this call should have gotten an invitation. I encourage you to get as many presidents out to the calls. We had a good call early in May, and this is our second meeting, and we'll be dealing with membership health at the club level. And we want to use these forums as much as we can to encourage open and frank dialogue. You would have also heard me announce at the convention a concept called OptiForum, and I'm working with past President Rebecca Butler-Mona and other directors to see how we can bring topics of interest to open conversations on issues not only affecting optimism, because optimism affects the world, but affecting people in this world. And we want to have thought leaders come into that, and I'm hoping that we can launch one of those in early August. So a lot of things are happening. We've gotten communication that many of you are transitioning your conventions to a virtual convention. You would have heard that we're not having OI reps go out to Optimism national reps go out to conventions. But with the opportunity with a virtual platform, I've had some discussions with our Director of Leadership and my Chief of Staff this morning. We're going to try to make sure that we can get as many members of our board of directors in front of your conventions as possible, so that you get a chance to not only hear what we have to say, but to know who the leadership of this organization is. We believe it's very important that this creates a unique opportunity for us to continue to use the technology in a thoughtful and sensitive way. So I have a sore throat. I don't know about you, but I want to thank you all for joining us for the last 2 hours, as we have been able to do what was needed for a long time. And I apologize once again. I hope that you got the information that you needed to dispel any misinformation that was going on out there. We will try to find a mechanism to maybe give quarterly updates. Maybe use a page Benny. Maybe we put a section in the magazines that will keep members informed. I know JC Sanange and Claire Lebreche are on the call and they're taking careful notes. And we will have a debrief session. And I know that the RUSA committee, review of the organizational structure and administration, they're also on the call. So we have a lot of ears listening in as well. And our board of directors will take this information and we'll distill it. And we will try to improve where we're falling short and try to ensure that we get a pilot that makes sense for everyone and will be beneficial in the long run to our membership. Lister Florence, you're raising your hand.
I just want to thank you. I mean, this has been eye-opening to the complexity of our organization. Just fascinating to me. I think you've done a phenomenal job. I've been really impressed with the leadership and volunteers taking this on as a full-time job. So very eye-opening. Thank you.
Thank you to our future leader as well, Vice President Designate Lister Florence. Yeah. All right, without any further ado, those of you who haven't had dinner, go get some dinner. Those of you who haven't put in any members yet, go put in some members in your club and make sure that we can get this organization stabilized and continue to grow and do good things. So thank you, everyone. And please shoot me an email if you have anything that you want to shoot me offline that you were uncomfortable doing in public. So Adrian_Alcock at yahoo.com. Tracy, if you can type it in there quickly for me, you can reach me there, and we will respond to anything that you'll need. And all of our leaders, any one of these board of directors you see on this call, they are fully accessible, and they jump on me when I don't follow through properly. So trust me, you will get a response. So it's right there. So good evening, everyone, and good night.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks, Adrian.
Night, Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Cross.